Brayden Foster was halfway through his first deep tissue massage when he realized he hadn't exhaled in nearly a minute, and it had nothing to do with the pressure on his spine. "Breathe," came the soft, grounded voice behind him. "You're holding tension in your shoulders, not your lungs." He let out a breath, sharp and audible. "You're good at this," he muttered, face buried in the cushioned table. "Too good." "Years of practice," she said, calm but not cold. "Relax, you came here to let go, didn't you?" He almost laughed. "I came here to get away, from boardrooms, from endless investor meetings, from the headlines, from the city that never stopped asking him for something." But Brayden hadn't expected this, hadn't expected the hands currently pressing into his back to feel like the first real thing he'd experienced in months. The retreat was a last-minute decision. A private, invitation-only wellness center tucked into the Colorado Rockies, where phones were locked away on arrival and the guest list was kept strictly anonymous. He hadn't planned to talk to anyone, much less feel anything. But then she walked into the massage room, barely 5'4", auburn hair pulled into a messy bun, no makeup, no pretense, just confidence and ease in every movement. "Name?" she asked that first day, looking down at the clipboard. "Bray," she blinked. "Just Bray," he shrugged. "It's a retreat, thought I'd play along." She didn't pry, didn't ask what he did or where he was from, just gave a small nod, then pointed to the massage table. "Then lie down, Bray." And now, on his third session in 5 days, Brayden was starting to dread the idea of leaving the place. "You're quieter today," she said now, her fingers moving in practiced circles across his shoulder blades. "Thinking about," he paused. "You always ask your clients that, only the ones who look like they're on the verge of either a mental breakdown or an epiphany." He turned his head slightly to the side, just enough to see her. "Which one do I look like?" She gave a small smile. "Honestly." "Both," he laughed, and the sound surprised him. It felt real, he hadn't laughed like that in months. "What's your name?" he asked, propping himself up slightly. She hesitated, then said, "Lena O'Brian." "Lena." The name settled into his chest like it belonged there. "You from around here?" he asked, watching the way she avoided eye contact as she wiped her hands with a warm towel. "Not really, just needed a reset. Came here a few years ago for a job and never left. You like it, it's quiet. People keep their drama in the city." He sat up fully now, the towel draped across his lap. "And what about you? Any drama?" She gave a dry laugh. "Not anymore." Something about the way she said it made him want to ask more, but she was already gathering her things. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, her tone professional again. He nodded. "Yeah, same time." And as she left the room, Brayden realized something strange. He wasn't thinking about his stock portfolio or his upcoming acquisition meetings. He was thinking about her. The next morning, Brayden skipped the yoga class and found himself wandering the hiking path behind the retreat. It was quiet, the kind of quiet you couldn't buy in Manhattan, no matter how high your penthouse was. He didn't hear the footsteps until they were practically next to him. "Skipping group meditation?" Lena asked, stepping up beside him in leggings and a plain zip-up hoodie. "I figured I'd try actual nature instead," she smiled. "Bold move. Most of the guests only last about 15 minutes out here before they go looking for Wi-Fi." He raised a brow. "You spying on me?" "I don't have to. You're the only one who walks with shoes that clean." He looked down at his designer sneakers and laughed. "Busted." They walked in silence for a while, the leaves crunching under their feet. Then he said, "You're not like the other staff here," meaning, you're not fake. You don't push the oils or the mantras or the positive vibrations. She laughed. "You're not wrong. What brought you here, really?" She stopped walking. "I was living in LA. My mom got sick. I came back to help her. When she passed, I didn't feel like going back, so I stayed." His chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "It was 3 years ago." She started walking again. "I kept the job because it felt simple, honest. And I got tired of pretending to be someone I wasn't." He looked over at her, suddenly desperate to know more. "What did you pretend to be?" She gave him a sideways glance. "Someone who wanted to be famous. Someone who cared about likes and followers and parties with people who didn't know my last name. And now I like giving massages to people who forget to breathe." She bumped her shoulder into his. Like you, he smiled, and something warm settled in his chest. She wasn't flirting. She was just real. That night, Brayden couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the way Lena had laughed, the way her eyes crinkled when she smiled, how she didn't treat him like someone to impress. She didn't know who he was. Not really. Not the man who bought out 2 tech companies last quarter. Not the billionaire who had his face splashed across Forbes. To her, he was just Bray. And for the first time in a long time, he liked being that guy. "Why do I get the feeling you're not leaving when your week is up?" Lena asked 2 days later as she walked him back from their now regular afternoon hike. "Because I'm not," he said simply. She stopped short. "You're extending your stay," he nodded. "Yeah, I need more time to figure some things out." "Like what?" He looked at her, his gaze serious. "Like why the hell I feel more alive with you than I have in years." She blinked. "Bray, I'm not asking for anything." He stepped closer. "I just want to know if there's something here between us." Lena hesitated, then said quietly, "I don't date clients." "Then I'll stop being one," he said without missing a beat. "Right now, I'll cancel the rest of my sessions with you." Brayden, he froze. She hadn't meant to say it, but she had his full name. She knew. "You knew who I was?" he asked, voice low. She swallowed. "Not at first, but yeah, I figured it out." "And you didn't say anything?" "I didn't want to treat you like a headline. I liked you better as Bray." He stared at her, heart pounding. And then, for the first time in his life, Brayden Foster did something completely unplanned. He leaned in and kissed her. Right there in the middle of the trail, with the wind blowing around them and the sun dipping behind the trees, and she kissed him back. Brayden stood with his hands in his jacket pockets, eyes scanning the line of pine trees ahead as if they held answers. The kiss was still fresh between them, but Lena hadn't said a word since. She'd pulled back gently, touched his arm once, and then turned toward the retreat without looking back. Now, 3 hours later, he found himself pacing the edge of the fire pit patio, restless in a way he couldn't rationalize. This wasn't how he operated. He didn't chase people. He didn't wait for them to make the next move, but for her, he was doing both. "Brayden," her voice came from behind him, quiet but sure. He turned. Lena stood near the wooden railing, her hair loose this time, shoulders tense beneath a faded denim jacket. She looked like she'd taken a walk just to build up the courage to speak. "I needed a minute," she said. "I gave you 3 hours," he replied. A small flicker of amusement touched her lips, but it faded fast. "This is complicated." "I'm not asking you to marry me," he said. "I kissed you because I wanted to. You kissed me back. That's not complicated." "It is for me," she said, stepping closer. "Because I wasn't supposed to feel anything for you." He waited. She wasn't finished. "I've lived here for 3 years, and no one's ever made me want to leave the safety of this place, until now, and that terrifies me." "You think I'm going to hurt you?" he asked. "I think you live in a world where people like me get forgotten the second the jet takes off." He stepped in, closing the distance between them. "Then don't let me take off." Her eyes searched his, uncertain but softening. "You don't even know who I am." "I know you came here to start over. That you don't pretend to be anything you're not. I know you talk to trees when you think no one's listening because I heard you on the trail yesterday." Her eyes widened slightly. "And I know," he continued, "that you've been hiding behind this place long enough." Lena took a slow breath. "My mother left me this cabin. It's not much, but it's mine. I haven't let anyone inside since the funeral." "Show me," he said. "Let me see where you go when you're not walking other people through their healing." She hesitated. "It's not exactly penthouse material." "I don't care." They drove out in her mud-streaked Jeep, the heater humming low as they followed a winding gravel path deeper into the forest. She didn't speak much, and he didn't push her to. The cabin sat nestled between 2 tall aspens, its porch sagging slightly, roof patched in places with mismatched shingles. The lights were warm inside, and a single plant sat in the front window, half alive. She unlocked the door and stepped aside. "Welcome to the least impressive real estate you've ever stepped foot in." He walked in, took in the worn couch with a knitted throw draped over the back, the shelf of old books, the framed photo on the mantel of a woman with Lena's eyes and a fierce, protective smile. He turned to her. "It's perfect." "No, it's not," she said, kicking off her boots. "But it's the only place I've ever felt like I could breathe." He watched her move to the small kitchen and pour 2 mugs of tea, her hands steady but her shoulders still carrying more than she let on. "You always this quiet at home?" he asked, taking the mug she offered. "I'm usually alone." That wasn't an answer. She sat on the edge of the couch, pulled her legs up beneath her. "I was engaged once, in LA. He was an actor small time. I thought I was in love, but I was 22 and stupid. I caught him with a girl who called herself his co-star in life. I left everything behind the next day." Brayden sat beside her, his voice low. "And you decided love wasn't worth the risk." She didn't deny it. "I decided I didn't know what love was." He leaned back, sipping his tea. "You don't think people can change?" "I think most of them don't want to." He set the mug down. "I used to think I had everything. Company, power, women who knew my name before I walked into the room, but lately it all feels like noise." She looked at him, her gaze softer now. "Then why keep living in the middle of it?" "Because I didn't know there was another way." "You do now," she said. They sat in silence, the kind that didn't feel heavy, just full. "Come back tomorrow," she said finally. "No massages, no hikes, just dinner." He raised a brow. "You cook?" "I used to, before I started living on protein bars and herbal tea." "I'll bring the wine," he said. "Make it red. And don't show up in anything that costs more than my Jeep." He laughed. "No promises." The next day he arrived just before sunset. No driver, no watch. Just Bray in jeans and a pullover, holding a bottle of red and a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked along the edge of the trail. Lena opened the door with flour on her cheek and a bandana in her hair. "You're early. You're dusty," she grinned, stepping aside. "Get in before something eats the flowers." Dinner was roasted vegetables, handmade flatbread, and something that might have once been a lentil stew. They ate by candlelight, not because it was romantic though it was, but because the power flickered off every few hours. He told her about learning to code at 14, about the first app he sold before he could legally drink, about the night he almost walked away from it all after his father's funeral. She told him about her mother's humming while she cooked, about the way she used to dance barefoot on the porch when it rained, about how Lena played piano once before she couldn't bear to hear music without crying. "Play for me," he said. "There's no piano here." "Then let me buy you one," she laughed, but there was no mockery in it, just disbelief. "You'd really do that, Lena?" he said gently. "I'd buy you the whole damn forest if it would make you smile like that again." She looked away, flustered, almost shy. "Don't say things you don't mean." "I don't waste words." They cleared the dishes together, bumping elbows and laughing when he nearly dropped a plate into the sink. When the lights flickered out again, she lit a candle and looked at him across the counter. "This is starting to feel like something," she said. "It already is." She stepped around the island, stood just inches from him. "I don't want you to leave," she whispered. "Then don't ask me to." And this time, when she kissed him, there was no hesitation. And when he kissed her back, it wasn't just desire. It was something deeper, something real. The first snow fell overnight, dusting the forest in a quiet white that muted everything into stillness. Brayden stood on the porch of Lena's cabin with a mug of coffee in one hand and a blanket draped over his shoulders, watching the flakes settle on the trees. The world felt suspended, delicate, untouched. Behind him, the door opened with a creak. Lena stepped out barefoot, wearing one of his sweaters that hung down to her thighs. She looked at the snow, then at him. "You're going to freeze," she said, rubbing her arms. "I've survived boardroom interrogations by hedge fund managers," he replied. "I can handle a little Colorado morning." She leaned against the railing beside him. "You make everything sound like a financial conquest." He glanced at her, then looked out into the woods again. "It's how I've always understood the world. Measurable, strategic, competitive." She was quiet for a moment before she asked, "And what am I in that equation?" He turned fully toward her. "You're the first thing I haven't tried to win." She didn't smile, "Not this time." "Then why are you still holding back?" He lowered the mug. "What do you mean?" "You haven't told anyone where you are, not your assistant, not your investors. You keep pushing off going back, but you're not making a decision either. You're just hovering between two lives." He set the coffee on the railing, his jaw tightening. "Because I don't know how to make this one real." She folded her arms. "It is real. You just have to stop waiting for it to fall apart." For a moment, the only sound was the wind brushing through the trees. "I'm not used to staying still," he admitted. "I don't know what it looks like to build something that isn't part of a 5-year projection." Lena stepped closer, her gaze steady. "Then start by building something here, something small. You don't have to buy a forest, just fix that broken step on the porch." He laughed, but it faded fast. "I've never fixed anything with my hands." "Then I'll teach you," she said, "but only if you stop pretending you're not already halfway in." Later that day, they drove into the small town nestled at the base of the mountain. It was the kind of place with a single traffic light and a hardware store that doubled as a bait shop. Lena waved to the woman behind the counter, who didn't even blink when she saw Brayden's face. He picked up a toolbox and turned it over as though it might bite him. "Is there a manual?" he asked. Lena raised an eyebrow. "You've built companies from the ground up, but a hammer scares you?" "I don't trust anything that doesn't come with a legal contract." She snatched the box from his hands. "Good thing trust isn't required. Just effort." They spent the afternoon on the porch, Brayden on his knees trying to pry up a warped plank while Lena held the flashlight even though it was still broad daylight. "I can't believe I'm letting you near my house with a crowbar," she muttered. "I resent that," he said, grunting as the board finally gave way. "I'm making progress, you're making splinters. Progress is messy." They sat on the steps afterward, dust on their jeans and hands raw from the cold. Lena leaned against his shoulder, breathing steady. "You've never done anything like this," she said. "No," he admitted, "but I've never wanted to." She looked up at him. "What changed?" "You." She didn't respond, didn't need to. That evening, Brayden returned to his private suite at the retreat. It was the first time he'd gone back in days. The staff greeted him like he was a ghost, unsure if he still counted as a guest. He sat on the edge of the bed, the silence pressing in. Then he pulled out his laptop. The moment the screen lit up, notifications exploded, a week's worth of missed calls, urgent emails, flagged meetings. His COO had sent 5 messages marked critical. He clicked on the most recent one. "Investors are threatening to pull if you don't return by Monday. We can't keep stalling." He ran a hand through his hair, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. The next morning, he was waiting outside Lena's cabin before sunrise. She opened the door in sweatpants and a faded hoodie, hair damp from a shower. "I have to go back," he said without preamble. She didn't flinch. "I figured. They're threatening to collapse the deal if I'm not in New York by Monday morning." She stepped onto the porch, arms crossed. "So you're choosing them?" "I'm choosing responsibility," she nodded slowly. "And where do I fall in that?" He hesitated. "I don't know, that's the truth. I want to be here, but I built something I can't just walk away from." "I'm not asking you to," she said. "I just want to know if I was ever part of the equation." He reached for her hand. "I've thought about you more in the past week than I've thought about any company I've ever built. But you're still leaving." "I'll come back." She tilted her head. "Will you?" He stared at her, then let go of her hand. "I don't make promises I can't keep." She stepped back. "Neither do I." He left that afternoon. The flight was quiet. No assistants, no staff, just Brayden in first class staring out the window as the mountains shrank behind them. He landed to a car waiting at the curb, a suit pressed and ready in the backseat, his phone already buzzing with new demands. But nothing felt the same. The penthouse was spotless, staged like a showroom. The view stretched across the entire skyline, but it didn't anchor him. It unsettled him. At the board meeting the next day, his legal team clicked through slides and projections. The investors sat stiff and expectant. Brayden looked out the floor to ceiling windows at the glass towers across the street. "I'm pulling out of the deal," he said suddenly. The room froze. "What?" His CFO choked. "I'm stepping back, effective immediately. I'll keep my shares, but I'm removing myself from operations." "You can't just—" "I can," he said, standing. "And I just did." He walked out of the room, ignoring the chaos behind him. That night, he stood alone on the rooftop of his building, the city stretching in every direction like a machine that never slept. He pulled out his phone, and he called her, but it went to voicemail. He stared at the screen. Then he booked a flight, first class, 1 seat. He was going back. The plane touched down just as the sun began to rise over the Rockies. casting long shadows across the jagged peaks. Brayden didn't wait for the gate to clear or the other passengers to shuffle off. He was already moving, his coat slung over one arm, eyes fixed forward, boots hitting the jet bridge like he had a destination etched into his bones. The Jeep was still parked in the same crooked position outside the retreat's gravel lot. He recognized the dent in the bumper and the faded sticker on the rear windshield. But Lena wasn't there. He checked the front lobby. The receptionist blinked in surprise but didn't ask why Brayden Foster, who had left in a private jet days ago, was suddenly standing in hiking boots at the front desk. "Lena O'Brian," he said, voice steady. "Is she working today?" "She took some time off," the woman said, flipping through a paper schedule. "Said she needed space." "Did she say where she was going?" "No," she said, then paused, "but she packed a bag." Brayden walked out without another word. The cold didn't register. He climbed into a rental, turned onto the winding road that led away from the retreat, and drove with no destination beyond instinct. The cabin came into view just as the first flurries started to fall again. He knocked once, no answer. He tried the handle. Locked. He stepped back, staring at the porch, the fixed step now solid beneath his feet. A thin trail of footprints led behind the cabin toward the edge of the woods. He followed them. The trail curved past the frozen stream and ended in a clearing with a small wooden bench beneath a pine canopy. Lena sat there, her hands buried in her lap, a knitted hat pulled low over her ears. "I was starting to think you wouldn't come back," she said without turning. "I wasn't sure if I should," he replied, his breath visible in the morning air. "Why?" she asked, still facing forward. "Because I didn't know if you'd want me to." She looked at him then, her eyes unreadable. "You left without a promise." "I left with 100 reasons to return," he said, stepping closer. "I didn't make a promise because I didn't want it to be empty." And now, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She frowned. "What is that?" "My resignation," he said, holding it out. "I'm done with the company, with the deals. With pretending that any of it matters more than the way I feel when I'm with you." Lena looked at the paper but didn't take it. "You're giving up everything?" "I'm choosing something better," he said. "Something that actually means something." She stood, brushing snow off her coat. "And what happens when you miss the noise, the control, the chaos?" "I'll build something new," he said. "Here, with you, if you'll let me." She stepped closer, the wind catching her hair where it escaped beneath her hat. "You're not the same man who walked into that massage room." "I know," he said, "and I never want to be him again." Lena studied him, her eyes sharp and searching. "What does this look like to you?" "Us," he reached for her hand. "It looks like a cabin that needs insulation. A garden that's probably buried under 2 feet of snow. A piano sitting in a delivery truck waiting for someone to sign off on it. And you, every day, not because I need to escape, but because I want to stay." Her breath hitched just barely. "I can't promise I'll always know what I'm doing," he said, "but I'll never stop showing up." She didn't answer at first, then she slid her hand into his. "You're late," she said softly. "I got here as fast as I could." They walked back to the cabin in silence, her hand still in his. Inside, the fire was long dead in the hearth, but the space felt warm anyway. He took off his coat and looked around. "You changed the furniture," he said. "I moved the couch," she corrected. "It faces the window now." "I thought maybe it was time to stop hiding from the view." She crossed the room, opened a cupboard, and pulled out 2 mismatched mugs. "I didn't keep your wine," she said, "but I do have cinnamon tea," he smiled. "Sounds perfect." They sat on the couch, knees touching, tea steaming between them. Lena glanced at him. "You sure you don't want to go back to your penthouse?" He shook his head. "I think I like this one better." She rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time since he'd met her, she didn't seem guarded, not hidden, just Lena. After a while, he said, "I want to build something with you." She tilted her head. "Like what?" "A life, a home, whatever we want it to be." She traced the edge of her mug with her thumb. "I've been alone for a long time. You're not anymore." She didn't respond with words. Instead, she leaned in and kissed him, not tentative, not uncertain. It was a kiss of decision, of grounding, of yes. Later, as the snow thickened outside and the fire crackled again, Brayden pulled a small velvet box from his jacket pocket and set it on the table between them. Lena stared at it. "What's that?" He didn't open it, just looked at her. "I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow," he said, "but I'm asking you to be mine, fully, no halfway, no waiting." She reached out and placed her fingers over the box. "Then I need you to do one thing first," she said. "Anything? Build me a porch swing," he laughed. "That's it," she smiled. "That's everything." He took her hand again, lacing their fingers together. "I'll build you an entire house around it." Outside, the snow fell heavier, blanketing the world in white. But inside, the warmth between them was unmistakable. And for the first time in either of their lives, it felt like home. The porch swing was finished by the end of February. The wood was sanded smooth, the chains sturdy and bolted into the rafters, and the cushions Lena had stitched by hand were thick with worn flannel covers. Brayden had refused to let her help him with the construction, determined to do it on his own. It had taken him twice as long as it should have, and he dropped a wrench on his foot more times than he cared to admit. But when she stepped out onto the porch and saw it for the first time, he'd never seen her smile like that. She didn't say anything right away. Just sat down carefully, ran her fingers along the armrest, then looked up at him. "You remembered the blue thread," she said. "You said it reminded you of the lake near your grandparents' house," he replied. "I figured if I was going to build my first piece of furniture, it should match something that made you feel like you were 10 again." She pulled her knees up under her, tugged the blanket tighter around her legs, and leaned back as the swing began to move gently. "You're impossible. That's the nicest thing anyone's said to me this week." She laughed, and the sound carried into the trees. Inside the cabin, the fire crackled in the stove while a stew simmered on the range. There were now shelves where empty walls had been, filled with books Brayden had ordered from a local bookstore in town. The piano had arrived 2 weeks earlier, and she played it every morning before breakfast, always barefoot, always humming softly. He never interrupted. One afternoon, she wandered into the garden to find him kneeling in the snow, measuring spacing between the raised beds he planned to build. "Didn't realize billionaires knew how to compost," she said, arms crossed as she watched him adjust the level. "I don't," he said. "That's what YouTube is for." "I thought you said you didn't bring your phone." "I borrowed yours when you were asleep." She raised an eyebrow. "You watched gardening tutorials while I was snoring." "No," he said. "You don't snore, you talk in your sleep." Her eyes widened. "What did I say?" He stood, brushing snow from his gloves. "You said you dreamed we had chickens." She laughed so hard she had to sit down on the edge of the porch. "Well, I did grow up with chickens." "Maybe it's a sign." That weekend, he called a man from town and arranged to have a small coop delivered. By the end of the month, they had 4 hens and a rooster that Brayden insisted on naming Lucius. "You can't name a chicken Lucius," Lena said as she scattered feed. "Why not? It sounds like a villain in a novel." "He pecked me when I reached for the water tray. He is a villain." She leaned against the fence, watching him fumble with the latch. "You're not going back to the city, are you?" He looked at her, the wind pushing a strand of hair across her cheek. "No, I'm not going anywhere." That night, she curled against him on the couch, her head resting on his shoulder as they listened to the wind outside. "Do you miss it?" she asked. He didn't have to ask what she meant. "Sometimes, but I don't miss who I was in it. You were never just that guy, you know." He kissed the top of her head, his hand finding hers beneath the blanket. "I didn't know that until you showed me." Spring came slowly. The snow melted in patches, then all at once, revealing the garden beds Brayden had built and the narrow path of stones Lena had laid between them. They planted early lettuce, carrots, and onions. On weekends, they drove down to the farmer's market, where Lena sold bundles of dried lavender and Brayden bartered for fresh eggs even though they had their own. One morning, she woke to find a note on her pillow, downstairs. She pulled on a sweater and padded barefoot into the kitchen. The smell of cinnamon hit her before she saw him. He stood at the counter, turning pancakes with a spatula, wearing the same shirt he'd worn the day he arrived at the retreat. There was flour in his hair. "You're cooking," she said, eyes narrowing. "I've evolved." She leaned against the counter. "What's the occasion?" He turned off the stove, wiped his hands on a towel, and walked over. "I was thinking about what you said, about not making promises unless you mean them." She watched as he pulled a small velvet box from his back pocket and opened it. Inside was a ring unlike anything she'd imagined. It wasn't flashy. There were no enormous diamonds or elaborate settings, just a simple gold band with a single sapphire, deep blue and unpolished. "It reminded me of your eyes," he said quietly. "Right before you cry." She stared at it, her breath caught. "I'm not asking for a ceremony right away. I'm not asking for a perfect life. I'm just asking for this, waking up to you every morning, burning pancakes, fixing fences, laughing when Lucius crows at the wrong hour. I'm asking for the real parts, the messy, beautiful, ordinary parts." She didn't speak. Just stepped forward, wrapped her arms around his neck, and kissed him like she'd been waiting her whole life to get it right. When she finally pulled back, she reached for the box and slid the ring onto her finger. "You've got yourself a yes." The wedding was small. Just them, a few friends from town, and a woman named Melody who wore a straw hat and officiated with a warm smile and a Bible tucked beneath her arm. Lena wore a cream-colored dress she'd found in a vintage shop, and Brayden wore a navy suit that didn't quite fit anymore, but still made her eyes go soft when she looked at him. They said their vows beneath the same pine canopy where he'd first found her after he left and came back. Instead of a reception, they hosted a dinner on the porch, grilled vegetables, fresh bread, and a bottle of red they'd been saving since winter. That night, long after the last guest had gone and the candles had burned low, Brayden stood in the doorway of the cabin as Lena swayed barefoot to the faint sound of music from the record player. She turned to him, hand outstretched. "Dance with me." He took her hand, pulled her close, and they moved slowly, the swing creaking gently in the background. "You know," she said softly, "if someone had told me a year ago that I'd marry a man who tried to seduce me with a porch swing and a chicken named Lucius." He smiled against her temple. "You would have run the other way. I would have laughed in their face." And now she looked up at him, eyes full. "Now I know better than to laugh at fate." Outside, the wind settled, the stars stretched wide overhead. And inside, two people danced quietly in a cabin built not from plans, but from choices, each one leading to this together. Always in love.